Howdy, everybody. I'm Kyle Ferguson. This is the toxicity of Final Fantasy XIV, or the lack thereof. This is a bit of a phenomenon, even a feature of the Final Fantasy community. As the game has grown, it's maintained its welcoming status. And as someone who entered the game as a gladiator, now paladin, I immediately, without knowing what I was doing, started getting thrust into tanking the instances of the required dungeons that were part of the game. Should you start an MMO as a tank? Probably not, but I had been through World of Warcraft, and I've also been through many MOBAs and strategy games. I've received plenty of toxicity in the past, and I knew that if I didn't start tanking, I might never get on that horse. Getting to max level and then trying to switch things up seemed a bit much. So I used the chat as I was recommended to do. I said in chat, first time here. And things went pretty well. My first experience in any Final Fantasy XIV dungeon was in that Sa-Ta-Sha, the sort of water and dock themed duty that you do as part of the main story quest. I entered and said, first time here. And a rather kindly bunny girl gave me a rather massive rundown of everything I should know and led me through, letting me even do the pools on top of that. It was a bit surprising, but maybe this was a one-time thing. But around the time of Hawk Manor, I started saying, first time here, but I've watched a video, because things were getting more complicated. And I did. I'd go watch a 4-player squad gaming dungeon guide series right before doing the instance. Now, it would spoil things a little bit for me, but it also made me appreciate mechanics, particularly those that might be phased out through the zerging that might happen with players rouletting in. For those who don't know the terminology, and I'm still learning it, a roulette is a sort of dungeon finder that awards points or tokens that you can use at max level. So people queue up, get a random dungeon or even a raid through that thing, and get scaled down and participate as experienced players alongside other new players. The only way for them to know that you're new is if you say something. In Hawk Manor, our healer was working a tiny bit too hard, so they informed me I should use more cooldowns, even letting me know the names of the various abilities that I should be popping frequently. In Final Fantasy, tank cooldowns are quite short, and you even use them on trash. If I make the healer's job easier, then they get to do some damage, and we get through the content quicker and more efficiently. Final Fantasy group content is very much a balance about throughput and survivability, rather than sticking to your own job, tanking, healing, or DPS. Everyone is expected to do a little bit of DPSing. Stone Vigil was the first time there was any sort of tension in the room. I was severely undergeared and didn't know it. My rings were still level 1, and I had to go shopping to make up for it. The main story quest had not provided the rings. And my healer was just struggling, perhaps, with their role. There was a brief conversation after a wipe about me pulling too much. Then there was the Castrum, my first big raid. And in this particular raid, I got my gear inspected. I didn't know at the time you could hit enter during a cutscene to type, so I thought this particular person was just a very fast typer, as every time a cutscene finished, they had a new paragraph for me. But again, it was kind. It was about how I could get better gear, and that my inventory might have boxes that I haven't opened inside of it, which was very true. Every time I said, first time here, but I watched a guide video, someone said, cool, you're off tank, and there was no problem in the room. Since then, there have been more wipes on Good King Moogle and Leviathan, but nothing's ever gotten out of hand. And perhaps the biggest and most immediate difference you find between Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft is just the time investment. There is less trash, and the dungeons overall take less time. As such, your failures aren't wasting as much time of the other players. When each dungeon's over, you're prompted to take part in the commendation system, where you vote for someone in the group who did a good job. I found saying this is my first time here has earned me a lot of commendations, which has been rather nice. Maybe tanks just get more commendations, I'm not sure. There are weekly quests to give out commendations, but again, doesn't account for the whole picture. Maybe it's the sort of underdog fandom that the game has had since its release. The original Final Fantasy XIV being a huge bomb that fans stuck with until it got way better. Maybe it's an example set by the devs, After all, they're so apologetic and open about everything. Why wouldn't the players be apologetic, open, even patient? When you compare that to the World of Warcraft, we know what's good for you hubris that's been exhibited over the past several years, maybe that does leak into player base. Maybe it's just the fact that Blizzard made competitive games, so naturally their audience is just more competitive. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean people are in the way of your objective, which is more gear, higher levels, rather than with you along for the story. And that's ultimately where I find the solution to all of this. The story of Final Fantasy gets in the way of you being a toxic player. You are the warrior of light. People are always talking about what a heroic and great person you are. Children are cheering for you in the streets. You save people. You are a beacon of hope. Would that very person then go into a dungeon and flip out on somebody? Would the warrior of light be unwelcoming to fellow adventurers who they need to complete their jobs and advance their stories? Constantly throughout the main story quest, you are told to gather your companions or look for cell swords for hire who might undertake this mission. The idea is that you're the one leading them, but they're going to help you ultimately. Everyone's working together. Maybe it's the fact that the bad guys can be redeemable, saved. They aren't just merely corrupted and need to be put down. They aren't wholly evil. One of my favorite moments from A Realm Reborn is when our big bad turns to his fellow companions and tells them they're worthy of praise. The villains have motivations, can even be wrong. In fact, the biggest amount of toxicity I've noticed in this game came this week during the massive queues. I was running the Crystal Tower, and Group C was not succeeding so well in destroying their part of the bargain. So things got, if you can even call it, slightly heated. Some oofs were exchanged, and some recommendations for where you should stand were posted in the chat. But otherwise, people moved on. No harm done. This might have been exacerbated by the queues, or it might have been the many, many reapers and sages just looking for a quick level up roulette to get back to their story. Maybe we were holding them back more than we're used to as main story quest adventurers. But is there not a mystery? Is it just a well-moderated community? You are not allowed to post DPS meters in the game or you risk being banned. When streamers have had issues with sniping or harassment, their issues have been solved. When reports happen of toxicity and harassment, they're acted upon. Are people scared to be rude? Be wow polite in the game, as I've heard it called, for fear of being removed from the community? If that's the case, then it's working as intended. Maybe scared isn't the right word. People merely respect that the devs are maintaining the community as they want it to be. You don't just set up Disney World, you keep it clean and well staffed. Now, I have not participated in Endgame by any means. I have not participated in housing or the role-playing community, so I can't necessarily speak to those social aspects, though I've heard some stories. Either way, this is a fascinating aspect of the game I did not expect. Part of the joy of my experience has been that I'm tanking for what seems like good people who are having a lot of fun. There are people in the streets playing musical instruments. There are people being wacky, posing for photographs, doing dances. It adds to a very alive atmosphere that also makes you want to participate in it and make it a better place. Why do you think Final Fantasy is a nicer game overall? What do you think is being done to keep it that way? Have you had your own experiences with toxicity in Final Fantasy that you feel don't match my own? Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like more Final Fantasy XIV coverage, check out my other channel, youtube.com/amovetv, where with Garrett Weinzierl, I'm doing topic-based Final Fantasy XIV videos each week. Of course, follow this channel, like, ring the bell, in order to get more content of this nature. Thanks for watching.